Money buys loyalty. Fear buys compliance. But what happens when the man holding the leash cannot even stand on his own 2 feet? Deegan rules the city from a custom-built wheelchair, his lower body broken, but his mind as sharp as splintered glass. When Anna walks into his guarded compound, she thinks she is just rehabbing a rich, bitter invalid to pay off her family's debts. She is wrong. Power doesn't need working legs to choke the life out of you, or to pull you into its bed. Rain lashed against the windshield of Anna's rusted Honda, blurring the massive wrought-iron gates of the Corrado estate. She killed the engine. The wiper blade stopped with a pathetic squeak, leaving her in near total silence. She stared at the sprawling stone mansion through the downpour. It looked less like a home and more like a fortress. Guard booths flanked the entrance. Cameras swiveled with quiet, predatory grace. Anna checked her rearview mirror. Dark circles bruised the skin under her eyes. She looked 30 going on 50. 2 shifts a day at the rehab clinic, plus side jobs, plus covering rent, plus bailing her brother Tommy out of every hole he dug himself into. Tommy's latest hole, however, wasn't one you could just climb out of. He owed $60,000 to a loan shark connected to the Corrado family. $60,000. She didn't even have $60 for groceries. Victor Butler had come to her apartment 3 days ago. He didn't break her fingers. He didn't yell. He sat on her cheap IKEA sofa, drank her bad coffee, and slid a contract across the chipped laminate table. A private live-in physical therapist for 6 months, the contract read. Debt forgiven upon completion. She didn't ask who the patient was. She didn't have a choice. A heavy knock on her driver's side window made her flinch. A man in a dark slicker stood outside, rain sluicing off his broad shoulders. He motioned for her to roll down the glass. Anna Fisher. Yes. Pop the trunk. Step out of the vehicle. She stepped into the freezing rain. 2 more men swept her car, checking under the seats, pulling apart her meager duffel bag. They patted her down with professional, humiliating efficiency. Satisfied, the first guard jerked his chin towards the house. Follow the driveway. Park around back. Victor is waiting. Victor stood under the portico of the rear entrance, dry and perfectly tailored in a charcoal suit. He tossed his cigarette onto the wet cobblestone and crushed it under an expensive leather shoe. You're late, Victor said. Traffic. Anna hoisted her duffel bag over her shoulder. Where's my patient? Inside. But first, some ground rules. Victor blocked the heavy oak door, his dark eyes locked onto hers. You are here to assist with his mobility, manage his pain, and facilitate his exercises. You do not ask questions about his business. You do not enter rooms with closed doors. If you see people you recognize from the evening news, no, you didn't. Understand? I don't care about your mafia politics, Victor. I care about Tommy's debt. Point me to the physical therapy room. Victor gave a slow, humorless smile. He's not an easy man, Anna. Don't take it personally when he tries to ruin your life. It's just his process. He opened the door. The interior smelled of old wood lemon polish and faint, expensive cigar smoke. Anna followed Victor through a labyrinth of hallways. The house was quiet, but it was a heavy, loaded silence. Men in dark clothes stood at intersections. Nobody spoke. Victor stopped in front of a pair of double mahogany doors. He didn't knock. He just pushed them open. The office was cavernous. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes that looked like they had never been touched. Behind a massive mahogany desk sat Deegan Corrado. He was staring at a laptop screen, his face illuminated by the harsh white light. He didn't look up when they entered. Deegan, Victor said. The new therapist. Deegan finally raised his head. Anna stopped breathing for a fraction of a second. He was not a man who looked like he belonged in a wheelchair. His shoulders were impossibly broad, straining the fabric of his black dress shirt. Thick, dark hair fell slightly over his forehead. A jagged, faded scar cut through his left eyebrow. But it was his eyes that caught her. They were a flat, dead slate grey. There was no warmth in them, no humanity, just a calculating void. He closed the laptop. The click echoed in the large room. He reversed his wheelchair from the desk. It was an expensive model, sleek and motorized, but modified. Reinforced frame, thicker wheels. Deegan manipulated the joystick with one hand, gliding around the desk to face her fully. His legs were clad in dark, tailored trousers. They rested on the footplates, perfectly still, motionless, dead weight. "You look tired," Deegan said. His voice was a low, rough baritone. It scraped against her nerves. "I work for a living," Anna replied, keeping her voice flat. She refused to break eye contact. Deegan's jaw ticked. He glanced at Victor. "This is the sister, the one paying off the degenerates tab." "Yes," Victor said. Deegan looked her up and down, dissecting her. The cheap raincoat, the scuffed boots, the exhausted posture. "I needed a professional, Victor, not a charity case." Anna dropped her duffel bag onto the Persian rug. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. "I have a master's degree in physical therapy and 6 years of experience specializing in spinal cord injuries. I'm licensed, bonded, and frankly, I don't give a damn about your charity. I'm here to do a job. Are we doing an assessment today, or are you just going to sit there and insult me?" The room went dead silent. Victor shifted his weight, his hand subtly brushing the inside of his suit jacket. Deegan stared at her. The slate-grey eyes narrowed. Slowly, a dark, cynical amusement settled over his features. "Assessment," Deegan said. He spun the wheelchair around with brutal efficiency. "Follow me, Miss Fisher. Let's see if you're worth 60 grand. The estate's gym was better equipped than the hospital where Anna worked. It smelled faintly of ozone and sweat. Sunlight filtered through high frosted windows, casting long, sharp shadows across the rubberized floor. Deegan maneuvered his chair next to a low, padded examination table. He didn't look at her. "Transfer," Anna said, pulling a clipboard and pen from her bag. Deegan gripped the armrests of his chair. His biceps bulged under his sleeves. With a sharp, practiced movement, he hoisted his entire body weight upward. His upper body was terrifyingly strong. He swung himself over, lowering his torso onto the padded table. He manually grabbed his right thigh, then his left, pulling his dead legs onto the surface. He didn't look at her for help. He did it with the grim, mechanical efficiency of a man who hated his own reliance on himself. Anna walked over, setting the clipboard down. "Where is the lesion?" "T10, Deegan said, staring at the ceiling. "Complete." Anna paused. A T10 complete spinal cord injury meant paraplegia. No motor function below the belly button. Complete loss of sensation. She had read his chart provided by Victor, but hearing it from him, seeing the stark reality of this powerful man, grounded forever, shifted something cold inside her. When was the injury? 2 years ago. How? Deegan turned his head slowly. The look he gave her was pure venom. "Lead poisoning. Next question." Anna didn't flinch. "I need to check your range of motion. We need to assess for contractures, spasticity, and skin integrity." "Just do your job." She started at his hips. She moved his legs, bending the knees, rotating the joints. His legs were heavy. Muscle atrophy was evident, though someone had clearly been maintaining his baseline flexibility. As she manipulated his right leg, a violent spasm racked the limb. His knee jerked upward, the foot kicking out erratically. Deegan grabbed the edge of the table. His knuckles turned white. He squeezed his eyes shut, a tight, sharp hiss escaping his teeth. Anna held the leg firmly, applying steady, gentle pressure to break the spasm. "Breathe," she instructed quietly. "Just breathe through it. It's just a reflex." "I know what it is." He snapped his voice tight with suppressed rage. The spasm subsided. Anna gently lowered his leg. She looked at his face. He was sweating. Not from exertion, but from the sheer, humiliating frustration of his body betraying him. Your previous therapist did a decent job preventing severe contractures, Anna noted, moving to his left leg. But your hamstrings are incredibly tight. You spend too much time in the chair. I run a business from that chair. Then run it from a standing frame for 2 hours a day, or you're going to lose what little flexibility you have left. Anna shot back. She bent his left knee toward his chest. Does this cause any referred pain in your back? No. She worked in silence for 20 minutes. The room was heavy with unspoken hostility. Deegan hated being handled. He hated being prodded. Anna could feel it radiating off him like heat from an engine block. He was a man used to absolute control, and this room was the one place where he had none. She finished the assessment and stepped back. She picked up her clipboard. Okay, Anna said. We have a baseline. The spasticity is severe. We'll start with aggressive stretching twice a day. I want you in a standing frame to help with bone density and digestion. We'll also work on core stability to improve your balance in the chair. Deegan sat up. He grabbed his legs, hauling them over the side of the table. I don't have time for twice a day. Make time. He looked at her, his jaw set. You don't give orders in this house, Anna. In this room, I do, she said, her voice dropping to a hard, flat tone. Out there, you can be whatever terrifying boss you want to be. But in here, you're a patient with tight hamstrings and severe clonus. If you don't listen to me, you're going to end up with pressure sores and joint deformities. Then you won't even be able to sit in that fancy chair of yours. Deegan went completely still. The silence stretched until it felt fragile, ready to snap. He stared at her, his chest rising and falling slowly. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten her. Instead, he reached out. His hand clamped around her wrist. His grip was like iron. He didn't pull her closer, but he held her firmly in place. Anna froze. Her heart slammed against her ribs, but she kept her face perfectly impassive. Deegan leaned forward. His face was inches from hers. She could smell peppermint dark coffee and the faint metallic tang of sweat. Don't mistake my condition for weakness, he whispered softly. I can break you in half with my bare hand, standing or sitting. Anna looked down at the massive hand wrapping around her wrist. Then she looked back up into his cold, dead eyes. Then let go, she said evenly, so I can write down your exercise schedule. For a long moment he didn't move. Then slowly his fingers uncurled. He released her wrist. He grabbed the armrests of his chair and swung himself back into it, landing with a heavy thud. He adjusted his legs onto the footplates without looking at her. Tomorrow, 6 a.m., Deegan said. He spun the chair towards the door. I'll be here, Anna replied. She watched him glide out of the gym. She looked down at her wrist. There was a faint red mark where his fingers had pressed into her skin. She rubbed it slowly, the adrenaline finally catching up to her, making her hands shake. 3 weeks bled into 4. The routine was grueling mechanical and wrapped in thick, suffocating tension. Anna stretched his limbs, monitored his skin, and forced him into the standing frame. Deegan endured it. He rarely spoke, and when he did, it was usually a sharp command or a cynical barb aimed at her stubbornness. But Anna was observant. She saw the dark bags growing under his eyes. She noticed the subtle increase in security around the estate. The guards were jumpy. Victor walked the halls with a phone perpetually pressed to his ear. Something was happening in Deegan's world. It came to a head on a Tuesday night. A storm was battering the coast, rattling the heavy window panes of the mansion. Anna was in her assigned bedroom, reading a medical journal, when a crash echoed from the floor below. She dropped the magazine. Silence followed. Then the low, furious cadence of Deegan's voice vibrating with rage. Anna hesitated. Victor's rule echoed in her head. Do not enter rooms with closed doors. Do not ask questions. But the shouting grew louder. Something shattered. Glass. She opened her door and crept down the hallway. The lights were dimmed. 2 guards stood outside Deegan's private study, their faces pale, staring rigidly ahead. They didn't stop her as she approached the heavy oak doors. They were slightly ajar. Anna peeked through the gap. The study was a wreck. A crystal decanter lay smashed against the stone fireplace, whiskey bleeding into the grout. Deegan was behind his desk. Victor stood across from him holding a burner phone. They hit the docks. Victor was saying, his voice tight. 3 of our men are dead. They took the shipment. Deegan's hands gripped the armrests of his wheelchair so hard the leather groaned. His chest heaved. Who? The Russians, Volkov. Deegan let out a harsh, bitter laugh. It sounded like scraping metal. He thinks I'm weak. He thinks because I'm bolted to this chair I can't protect my borders. We retaliate, Victor said. Tonight. Burn the warehouse. Deegan ordered. His voice was no longer loud. It was terrifyingly quiet. Burn it with Volkov's men inside. Send the ashes to his front door. Victor nodded sharply. I'll make the calls. He turned toward the door. Anna scrambled back, pressing herself against the wall in the shadows. Victor pushed past the doors and disappeared down the hall without seeing her. Anna waited until the guards moved away. She should have gone back to bed. She should have locked her door and ignored the violence dripping from the walls of this house. But she looked through the gap in the door again. Deegan was alone. The furious warlord was gone. He was slumped in his chair, his head resting in his hands. He looked defeated. He looked utterly hopelessly exhausted. He moved his hands to his thighs, staring at his motionless legs. With a sudden violent roar, he swept his arm across the desk. A lamp, a stack of files, and a heavy brass paperweight crashed to the floor. He gripped the wheels of his chair, spinning violently, trying to move towards the fireplace. But in his blind rage, the chair clipped the heavy leg of a leather armchair. The motorized wheelchair lurched. The tire caught the edge of an expensive rug. Deegan lost his balance. He tipped sideways, unable to use his legs to catch himself. He hit the hardwood floor with a sickening, heavy thud. The wheelchair tipped half over the motor, whining uselessly before clicking off. Anna didn't think. She pushed the doors open and ran inside. Deegan! He was pushing himself up onto his forearms, his chest heaving, his face contorted in a mixture of pain and pure, unadulterated humiliation. Get out! He snarled, his voice a feral growl. He didn't look at her. He kept his face angled toward the floor. You're hurt, Anna said, dropping to her knees beside him. Let me help you. I said, get the hell out. He shoved her shoulder. It was a weak shove, a desperate attempt to push away a witness. Anna didn't move. Stop it. You're going to tear your rotator cuff. She grabbed the heavy frame of the wheelchair. Gritting her teeth, she heaved it upright, locking the brakes. She turned back to Deegan. He was dragging himself toward the chair, his upper body straining his dead legs, trailing behind him like anchors. It was a brutal, undignified crawl. Anna reached under his arms. Don't touch me, he hissed, slapping her hand away. His chest was rising and falling rapidly. I don't need your pity. It's not pity, you idiot, it's gravity, Anna snapped. The cynicism she wore like armor suddenly cracked. I am your physical therapist. I lift people for a living. Now stop fighting me before you hurt yourself more. She grabbed him again, securing a grip around his ribcage. Deegan stiffened. He squeezed his eyes shut, turning his head away as she hauled him upward. He caught the armrest, using his own massive upper body strength, in tandem with her lift, to throw himself back into the seat. He slumped back, breathing hard. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Anna knelt in front of him. She reached out to adjust his legs, lifting his right foot back onto the footplate. Then she lifted the left. Are you in pain? She asked quietly. Did you hit your head? Deegan didn't answer. He just stared at the wall over her shoulder. His jaw was locked tight. The silence was heavy thick with the shame he refused to vocalize. The warlord who had just ordered men burned alive was entirely dependent on a woman he barely knew just to sit upright. "Deegan," Anna said softly. He finally looked down at her. His eyes were dark, stormy, and completely stripped of their usual calculating distance. He looked dangerous. He looked wounded. "Do you know what it feels like?" he asked. His voice was a low rasp. "To have an empire at your fingertips, to hold men's lives in your hands, and to lie on the floor like a dog because you clipped a chair. It's a mechanical error," Anna said, keeping her voice even grounded. "It happens. It doesn't change who you are." He let out a dark, bitter chuckle. "Doesn't it?" He reached down. His large hand grabbed her chin, tilting her face up toward his. His grip wasn't painful, but it was absolute. "They see me, Anna. They see a cripple. They think I can't protect what's mine. They think I can't hold my territory. They think I can't—" He trailed off his thumb, brushing slowly, deliberately across her lower lip. Anna's breath hitched. She was kneeling between his knees. The sudden intense shift in the atmosphere made the air feel thin. He wasn't looking at her like a patient anymore. He was looking at her like a man looking at a woman. A starved, desperate man. "I'm still a man, Anna. Do you think I can't do that?" the wheelchair-bound Mafia boss said. His voice was a dark, vibrating hum. He leaned forward, his face inches from hers. The heat of his body was overwhelming. The scent of spilled whiskey and male sweat filled her senses. Anna didn't pull away. She stared into his eyes, seeing the raw, bleeding pride underneath the anger. She saw the loneliness of a king trapped in a broken castle. "I know exactly what you are, Deegan," she whispered back. Her voice remarkably steady despite the chaotic hammering of her pulse. "But right now you're just a man sitting in the dark." Deegan's eyes darkened further. His hand slipped from her chin, sliding back into her hair. He gripped the back of her neck, his thumb resting against her racing pulse point. He didn't kiss her. He just held her there, anchored in the storm of his own making, pulling her breath into his lungs. The boundary between professional and collateral didn't just blur in the dim light of the study. It shattered completely. The morning air in the gym was freezing. Anna stood by the examination table, her hands shoved deep into the pockets of her scrub jacket. The wall clock ticked toward 6. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the heavy weight of Deegan's hand on the back of her neck, the raw, vibrating hum of his voice against her skin. She had spent years building walls, compartmentalizing her life into manageable, emotionless boxes. Survival required cold math. But last night the math had failed. The heavy gym doors swung open. Deegan rolled in. He wore a grey heathered t-shirt and dark track pants. The faint purple bruising under his eyes was stark against his pale skin, a testament to his own sleepless night. He didn't say a word. He maneuvered his chair next to the mat, locked the brakes, and began the brutal mechanical process of transferring his weight. Anna stepped forward. She didn't offer help. She knew better now. He hauled himself onto the mat, dragging his legs into position with short, jerky movements. He lay back, staring up at the fluorescent lights. His chest rose and fell in a steady, measured rhythm. "Left leg first," Deegan said. His voice was flat, unreadable. Anna knelt beside him. She placed one hand under his heel and the other just above his knee. As her fingers pressed into his skin, his abdominal muscles contracted visibly beneath the thin fabric of his shirt. A muscle in his jaw jumped. Neither of them spoke about the study. Neither of them mentioned the shattered glass or the closeness that had sucked the oxygen from the room. But the silence between them was no longer hostile. It was thick. It was waiting. She pushed his knee toward his chest, stretching the tight hamstring. A minor spasm twitched through his calf. Anna held the limb steady, her thumb pressing into the muscle belly to calm the reflex. Deegan turned his head, watching her hands. "You're pressing harder today. Your tone is worse today," Anna replied, evenly, not looking up. "The spasticity is reacting to stress. You're wired tight." "We burned Volkov's warehouse to the ground at 3 a.m., Deegan said. It was a casual statement, delivered with the same inflection a normal man might use to discuss the weather. "The stress is justified." Anna froze for a fraction of a second, her fingers digging slightly into his leg. Then she forced herself to resume the stretch. "I told you I don't want to hear about your business." "You were standing outside the door last night, Anna. You heard Victor." Deegan's slate-grey eyes locked onto her face. There was a sharp, calculating intelligence in his gaze. "You know exactly what I am. You know exactly what I do. Playing deaf won't keep you clean." "I'm not trying to stay clean," Anna said, lowering his leg and moving to the right one. "I'm trying to stay alive so I can pay off my brother's idiotic mistakes and go back to my miserable normal life. Volkov doesn't care about my hamstrings." Deegan let out a low, breathy sound that might have been a laugh. He reached down, his large hand brushing against hers as he adjusted his own knee. His skin was warm. "Your brother owes 60 grand. You've worked off 5. At this rate, your miserable normal life is a long way off." "I can do math, Deegan." "Then do this math," he said, his voice dropping into that dark, intimate register that made her pulse stumble. "Volkov knows about this estate. He knows who comes and goes. The people who work for me are targets. That includes the physical therapist who drives a rusted Honda and leaves the gates every Sunday to buy cheap groceries." Anna stopped moving. She looked down at him. "Are you trying to scare me?" "I'm giving you a warning." Deegan pushed himself up on his elbows. He was suddenly much closer, the physical distance between them evaporating. "You don't leave the compound. Not for groceries, not for a drive. You stay inside the gates." "Victor said I had Sundays off." "Victor doesn't run this family." Deegan snapped a flash of the warlord bleeding through. "I do, and I am telling you, you do not leave." The gym doors banged open before Anna could respond. Victor strode in. His suit jacket was unbuttoned, his tie loosened. He looked past Anna as if she were a piece of furniture and went straight to Deegan. "We have a problem," Victor said, his voice tight. Deegan didn't look away from Anna. "Tell me." "It's the harbor master. They found him in the trunk of his own car at the marina. Volkov left a message." Victor pulled a blood-stained piece of heavy cardstock from his pocket and held it out. "It's an eviction notice." Deegan finally broke eye contact with Anna. He took the card. He didn't read it. He just crushed it in his fist. His face transformed, the brief flash of human concern, vanishing behind a mask of absolute, terrifying coldness. "Lock down the estate," Deegan ordered. "Nobody in, nobody out. Double the perimeter guard. Put the dogs in the yard." "Done," Victor said. "But Deegan, we have an inside leak. Volkov knew exactly where the harbor master was hiding. Only 4 people had that address." Silence descended on the gym. It was a heavy, suffocating weight. Deegan slowly turned his head back to Anna. The intimacy of the previous moment was gone, replaced by the paranoid, lethal suspicion of a cornered predator. "Get your things," Deegan said to her. His voice was ice. Anna frowned. "My things. Move out of the guest wing. You're sleeping in the adjoining room to my suite." "Excuse me." Anna stood up, crossing her arms. "I'm your therapist, not your prisoner." Deegan gripped the edge of the mat, his knuckles turning white. "There is a rat in my house, Anna. Until I find out who it is, I don't trust anyone who walks through those doors. You stay where I can see you, or you can take your chances with Volkov's men outside." He didn't wait for her to argue. He hauled himself back into his wheelchair with a violent, terrifying burst of strength, spun the chair around, and rolled out of the gym, leaving Anna standing in the cold, empty room. The Corrado estate transformed into a fortress by nightfall. Heavy steel shutters dropped over the ground floor windows with loud, echoing clangs. Men in tactical gear carrying assault rifles patrolled the hallways, their boots thudding against the Persian rugs. The usual quiet of the mansion was replaced by the low static of two-way radios and the restless, dangerous energy of a military camp preparing for a siege. Anna sat on the edge of a massive four-poster bed. The room was connected to Deegan's master suite by a set of heavy double doors. It was opulent silk sheets, mahogany furniture, a private bathroom lined with Italian marble, but it felt exactly like what it was, a very expensive cage. Through the crack in the adjoining doors, she could hear the low murmur of voices. Deegan's command center had been relocated to his bedroom for security reasons. For 3 hours, captains and lieutenants had been filtering in and out, bringing reports, receiving orders, and planning violence. Anna stared at the wall. She should be terrified. She was trapped in a Mafia compound in the middle of a gang war, babysitting a paralyzed crime boss who thought she might be a spy. But her fear was entirely overshadowed by a bizarre humming adrenaline. Around midnight, the voices in the next room finally stopped. A door clicked shut. The heavy, oppressive silence returned. "Anna." Deegan's voice cut through the quiet. It wasn't a shout. It was a low, demanding summons. She stood up, smoothed her scrubs, and walked through the double doors. Deegan's bedroom was cavernous, lit only by a single heavy brass lamp on a desk in the corner. Maps and blueprints were scattered across the mahogany surface, weighed down by a half-empty bottle of bourbon and a loaded Glock 19. Deegan was sitting in his wheelchair by the window, staring out at the darkness through a narrow gap in the steel shutters. He had changed into a dark, button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled up to expose his thick forearms. He looked exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that seeped into the bones and corroded the soul. "You should be doing your pressure reliefs," Anna said, automatically falling back on her clinical training. "You've been in that chair for 18 hours. Deegan didn't turn around. "Pour me a drink." "You're taking baclofen for the spasticity. Alcohol depresses your central nervous system. It's a bad combination." He finally turned the chair. The slate-grey eyes were hollow, but a faint, cynical smirk touched the corner of his mouth. "My enemies are currently trying to blow up my front gate, Anna. I think a drug interaction is the least of my worries right now. Pour the drink." Anna hesitated, then walked over to the desk. She grabbed a crystal tumbler and poured 2 fingers of amber liquid. She walked it over to him. Their fingers brushed as he took the glass. The contact sent a sharp electric jolt up her arm. She stepped back quickly, putting a safe distance between them. Deegan noticed. He took a slow sip of the bourbon, his eyes never leaving hers. "Are you afraid of me, Anna?" he asked quietly. "I'm afraid of the men with guns patrolling the hallway." She deflected, crossing her arms over her chest. "I'm afraid of dying because my brother couldn't stop gambling." "That doesn't answer the question." "Yes," Anna said, her voice hardening. She refused to lie. "You order murders from your bedroom. You crush people who get in your way. I'd be an idiot not to be afraid of you." Deegan stared at the glass in his hand. He swirled the bourbon, watching the liquid catch the dim light. "Before the bullet severed my spine, I didn't need to be this ruthless. Fear was easy. I was big. I was fast. If someone crossed me, I put my hands on them, and they understood the hierarchy." He looked down at his dead legs. He slapped his right thigh. A dull, hollow smack echoed in the quiet room. He felt nothing. "Now," Deegan continued, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Now I have to be 10 times as vicious just to maintain the baseline. If I show mercy, they see weakness. If I hesitate, they see a cripple who can't pull the trigger. Volkov thinks he can take my city because he assumes a man who can't stand can't fight. Anna watched the raw, bleeding pride strip away the polished exterior of the Mafia boss. He wasn't asking for pity. He was stating a brutal mechanical fact of his existence. He was a shark that had to keep moving, keep biting or die. "So you burn warehouses," Anna said softly. "I burn the whole damn city if I have to," Deegan replied. He looked back up at her. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by an intense burning possessiveness. "And I protect what is mine." He set the glass down on a side table. He engaged the motors of his chair, rolling forward until he was right in front of her. Anna didn't back away. She held her ground. He reached out and grabbed the loop of her scrub pants, tugging her forward, so she was forced to step between his footplates. She was flush against his knees. "You aren't just collateral anymore," Deegan said. His voice was a dark, rumbling vibration that she felt in her own chest. "You understand that, don't you? I'm your physical therapist." Anna breathed, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You're a liar," he countered smoothly. His hands moved up her sides, his large palms resting warmly against her waist. "You look at me. The rest of them, Victor, my men, my enemies, they look at the chair. They look at the dead weight. You look at the man. You push me. You fight me. You don't treat me like glass." His thumb stroked the fabric of her shirt. "I don't let people in, Anna. I can't afford to. But you are already inside." "Deegan," she whispered, her hands coming up to rest on his broad shoulders. She meant to push him away. She meant to establish the boundary again. But her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt, instead gripping him tight. "This is dangerous. We're in the middle of a war." "I was born in a war," Deegan said. He leaned up, pulling her down slightly. His lips brushed against the corner of her mouth. It wasn't a violent kiss. It was devastatingly slow. It was a claim. "I know how to survive." He kissed her properly then. It was a collision of desperation and control. Anna tasted the sharp burn of bourbon and the dark, bitter edge of his reality. She didn't close her eyes and pretend he was a good man. She knew he wasn't. But as his hands tangled in her hair, pulling her impossibly close, she realized the terrifying truth. She didn't want a good man. She wanted him. Metal groaned under immense pressure. The sound tore through the quiet intimacy of the bedroom, vibrating up through the floorboards. Deegan broke the kiss instantly. His hand left Anna's hair dropping to the Glock 19 on the desk in a blur of motion. The heavy steel shutters covering the windows rattled violently. Then the world exploded. A concussive shockwave blew the reinforced glass inward. Shrapnel slammed into the steel shutters, creating a deafening metallic shriek that forced Anna to clap her hands over her ears. The lights flickered and died. Emergency red backup bulbs buzzed to life, casting long, bloody shadows across the mahogany furniture. Gunfire erupted outside. It wasn't the sporadic popping of a street fight. It was the disciplined, heavy cadence of automatic rifles. "Get down!" Deegan roared. He racked the slide of his Glock. Anna dropped to the floor, her knees hitting the expensive rug hard. She scrambled behind the solid mass of the oak desk. Deegan didn't follow. He couldn't. He sat exposed in the center of the room, his wheelchair a stationary target if the shutters failed. "Deegan, move!" she yelled over the deafening chatter of gunfire. "The motors are too slow for a sprint," he replied. His voice was terrifyingly calm. The warlord was back, his mind processing the violence with mechanical efficiency. He grabbed the manual push rims of his chair, abandoning the joystick. His massive shoulders bunched under his shirt. With brutal ripping pulls, he manually threw the heavy chair backward, getting out of the direct line of the window, just as a second explosion rocked the outer wall. The bedroom door kicked open. Victor burst in an assault rifle tight against his shoulder. He swept the room, his eyes finding Deegan in the red glare. "They breached the east wall," Victor shouted, stepping into the room and kicking the heavy door shut behind him. "C4 on the perimeter gate. At least 20 men. It's Volkov's heavy hitters." "The rat." Deegan asked, his gun pointed steadily at the doorway. "Disabled the outer cameras 5 minutes ago. We're flying blind on the east lawn." Victor glanced at Anna, who was crouched behind the desk. "We need to move you to the basement safe room now. They know this is the primary suite." Deegan shook his head. "If they breach the house, the basement becomes a tomb. I'm not getting trapped in a concrete box where I can't maneuver. We hold the second-floor landing. It creates a natural choke point." "Deegan, there are 20 of them," Victor argued, dropping a spare magazine onto the bed. "Then they'll die tired." Deegan looked down at Anna. "Get up." Anna didn't hesitate. The clinical detached part of her brain, the part that handled trauma victims and coding patients, took over. Panic was useless. She stood, staying low. "Grab the spare magazines from the top drawer," Deegan ordered. "Put them in your pockets. Keep your head below my chest." She pulled the heavy metal clips from the drawer, shoving them into the deep pockets of her scrub jacket. They felt like bricks. Victor opened the door a fraction, checking the hallway. "Clear to the landing. Move." Deegan grabbed the push rims again. The motorized function of his chair was designed for smooth indoor navigation and comfort, not speed. To move fast, he relied on his own brute strength. He propelled himself forward, the heavy wheels digging into the carpet. Anna ran in his wake, using his broad back as a shield, just as he had instructed. The hallway smelled of ozone and burning drywall. Down below, the massive front doors were taking heavy fire. The wood splintered with sickening cracks. They reached the top of the grand staircase. The landing was a wide semicircle of marble, enclosed by a heavy wrought-iron balustrade. From here, they had a perfect vantage point of the foyer below. 2 of Deegan's guards were crouched behind overturned marble pillars, returning fire through the shattered front windows. Deegan spun his chair, perfectly wedging the right wheel against a heavy stone planter to anchor himself. He locked the brakes. He couldn't duck behind cover like Victor. He had to be a fixed turret. "Anna, stay behind the pillar," Deegan ordered without looking back. He raised the Glock, resting his forearms on the armrests to stabilize his aim. The front doors finally gave way with a catastrophic crack. Wood and hinges flew inward. Dark figures poured into the foyer, moving with trained, lethal speed. The firefight was deafening. Anna pressed her back against the cold marble of the pillar, her hands clamped over her ears. The air filled with a fine white mist of pulverized plaster. She peeked around the edge. Deegan was terrifying. He didn't spray bullets wildly. He aimed, fired, and shifted targets with a cold, terrifying precision. The recoil of the gun barely moved his massive upper body. A man in the foyer dropped, then another, but more were coming in through the smoke. One of Volkov's men spotted the landing. He raised his rifle, aiming directly at Deegan's exposed chest. "Deegan!" Anna screamed. She didn't think. She lunged forward, grabbing the back handles of his wheelchair. She threw all her weight backward, unlocking the right brake and hauling the chair out of its anchored position. The marble pillar beside Deegan's head exploded into a cloud of sharp dust and stone fragments. A bullet grazed the leather armrest, tearing through the material just inches from his elbow. Deegan didn't flinch. He used the momentum of her pull to pivot the chair, locking his sights on the shooter. He fired twice. The man on the ground floor collapsed violently, his rifle clattering across the marble. Silence suddenly crashed down on the foyer, ringing in their ears. Victor reloaded his rifle, scanning the smoke-filled entrance. "They're falling back. Sirens. The local cops must have finally got brave enough to answer the calls." Deegan lowered his gun. He was breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling against the tight fabric of his shirt. He looked over his shoulder at Anna. She was still gripping the handles of his chair, her knuckles white, her chest heaving in sync with his. A smear of grey plaster dusted her cheek. He didn't thank her. He didn't need to. The slate-grey eyes told her exactly what he was thinking. She hadn't run. She hadn't frozen. She had pulled him from the fire. Victor Deegan said, his voice raspy from the smoke. "Find the rat. I want him breathing." Smoke clung to the high ceilings like a dirty shroud. The estate was a ruin of shattered glass, bullet-riddled antiques, and pooling water from a broken fire suppression pipe. The police had come collected their bribes at the gate and left the Corrado family to clean up their own mess. That was how the city worked. Anna stood in the corner of Deegan's study. The room was intact, mostly because it was located in the heavily fortified center of the house. She was shaking. The adrenaline had finally burned off, leaving behind a cold, hollow exhaustion. She watched Deegan. He sat behind his massive desk, his face wiped clean of any emotion. He was a statue carved from ice. The heavy oak doors opened. Victor walked in. Behind him, 2 guards dragged a man into the room, throwing him violently onto the floor. It was a kid. He couldn't have been older than 22. He wore the dark suit of the Corrado perimeter security, but it was torn and smeared with dirt. His nose was bleeding. He looked terrified. Anna recognized him. His name was Leo. He was the one who usually opened the gates for her when she arrived on Sunday mornings. He always smiled at her. He was trying to slip out through the service tunnels during the firefight. Victor said, his voice dripping with disgust. He had a burner phone in his pocket with Volkov's private number on speed dial. He cut the camera feeds. Deegan didn't say a word. He just stared at Leo. The silence dragged on, heavy and suffocating. Leo scrambled to his knees, his hands trembling. "Boss, please!" Leo choked out, his voice cracking. "They have my sister. Volkov's men took her 2 days ago. They said if I didn't drop the cameras tonight, they were going to put her in a shipping container. I didn't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice, Leo," Deegan said. His voice was soft, reasonable, and utterly devoid of mercy. "You chose your blood over mine. You chose to let 20 armed men into my home to slaughter my people. I'm sorry, I swear to God I'm sorry." Leo sobbed, pressing his forehead against the floor. Anna stepped forward involuntarily. Her medical instinct, her humanity screamed at her to intervene. He was just a kid protecting his family, just like she was doing for Tommy. The parallel was a sickening knot in her stomach. Deegan's eyes flicked to her. He saw the movement. He read the conflict in her face. "Anna," Deegan said. He didn't raise his voice, but it commanded the room. "Leave." She stopped. She looked at him, then down at the weeping boy on the floor. "Deegan, he's just a kid," she whispered. "He is a traitor who nearly got us all killed." Deegan replied flatly. "Victor, take her out of the room." "No," Anna said. Her voice shook, but she planted her feet. "I'm not going to hide in the hallway and pretend I don't know what happens when the door closes." Deegan's jaw tightened. "You think you want to see this? You think your cynical tough girl act prepares you for how my world actually operates? It doesn't. Get out." "I pulled you out of the line of fire." Anna shot back, the lingering adrenaline making her reckless. "I didn't run. Don't treat me like a civilian now." Deegan stared at her for a long, calculating moment. The tension between them was a live wire, sparking and dangerous. He was testing her. He was forcing her to look at the monster. He was daring her to flinch. "Fine," Deegan said. He turned his attention back to Leo. He placed his Glock 19 on the center of the desk. The heavy thud of the metal echoed in the quiet room. "Victor," Deegan ordered. Victor stepped forward. He didn't draw a gun. He drew a knife. Anna stopped breathing. The room spun slightly. This wasn't a movie. This was flesh and blood and terrifying reality. "Wait," Deegan said suddenly. He held up a hand. Victor stopped. Deegan reached for the wheels of his chair. He maneuvered around the desk, gliding smoothly across the floor until he was positioned directly in front of the kneeling boy. Leo looked up his face, pale tears cutting tracks through the dirt on his cheeks. "You think Volkov will let your sister live because you failed?" Deegan asked quietly. Leo shook his head, a choked sob escaping his throat. "No." "Where is she?" Leo swallowed hard. "The meatpacking plant on 4th, the abandoned one." Deegan looked at Victor. "Send a team. Burn the plant, get the girl. Send her out of state with 50 grand. Leo let out a gasping breath, a mixture of disbelief and frantic relief. "Thank you. Oh God, boss, thank you." "Don't thank me," Deegan said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "I protect my city. Volkov doesn't get to keep hostages in my territory." He reached down. His movements were smooth, practiced, and blindingly fast. He didn't use a weapon. His massive hands shot out, gripping the collar of Leo's jacket. With a terrifying surge of upper body strength, he hauled the boy entirely off the floor. Leo gasped, his feet scrambling uselessly against the air. Deegan's arms locked, holding the boy suspended, his dead legs serving as a heavy, unmoving anchor in the chair. "But I also don't forgive," Deegan whispered into the boy's ear. He shoved Leo backward with brutal force. The boy crashed to the floor, sliding across the polished wood. Deegan didn't look at Victor. He didn't have to. The order was understood. "Take him to the docks," Deegan said, his voice returning to that flat, emotionless void. "Make it quick, but make sure Volkov finds him." Victor hauled the sobbing boy to his feet and dragged him out of the room. The heavy doors clicked shut. Silence returned to the study. Deegan slowly turned his wheelchair to face Anna. She stood rigidly in the corner. Her face was pale, her breath shallow. She had watched a king dispense mercy to a sister and death to a brother in the same breath. "That is the man you kissed," Deegan said heavily. He didn't move toward her. He stayed where he was, a dark silhouette against the dim lighting. "That is the man sitting in the dark. I am not a victim, Anna. I am a butcher who just happens to need a ramp." Anna stared at him. The knot in her stomach twisted, but it wasn't fear. It was a terrifying, absolute clarity. She saw the blood on his hands. She saw the dead legs that trapped him in this violent life. She saw the crushing loneliness of a man who had to carry an empire on a broken back. She walked toward him. She didn't hesitate. She didn't flinch. She stopped between his footplates. She reached out her hands, resting on his broad, tense shoulders. "I know exactly what you are, Deegan," she said softly, her voice steady. She leaned down, pressing her forehead against his. "And I'm still here." Morning sunlight exposed the brutality of the night before with unforgiving clarity. The Corrado estate smelled of wet ash copper and industrial bleach. Cleanup crews had arrived before dawn, hauling away the wreckage and scrubbing the marble floors, but the heavy, oppressive weight of the siege lingered in the air. Anna stood in Deegan's private bathroom, running hot water over a thick washcloth. Her hands were steady, but her mind was a fractured mess of exhaustion and adrenaline. She wrung out the cloth and walked back into the master suite. Deegan was lying face down on the massive bed. He was stripped to the waist. His broad back was a canvas of deep purple bruising and angry red welts, the physical receipt of manually throwing a heavy wheelchair backward and hauling a grown man off the floor. His muscles were locked tight, rigid as iron underneath his pale skin. He hadn't spoken since he ordered Leo's death. The adrenaline had finally crashed, taking his formidable strength with it. The warlord was gone. What remained was a man whose body was violently rebelling against the abuse it had sustained. "This is going to burn," Anna warned softly. Deegan just gave a low, rough grunt into the pillows. She pressed the steaming cloth against his right shoulder blade. His entire upper body flinched. A sharp hiss of air escaped his teeth. His right arm was his lifeline, the anchor for his mobility, and he had pushed the rotator cuff to the absolute brink of tearing. Anna didn't coddle him. She applied a heavy, stinging layer of medicinal muscle, rub her thumbs, digging ruthlessly into the knotted tissue. She worked with clinical precision, breaking down the lactic acid and forcing the seized muscles to release. You tore microscopic fibers in your deltoid, Anna said, keeping her voice even as she massaged the heavy cord of muscle along his neck. If you try to transfer yourself to the chair today, you'll snap the tendon completely. You are grounded. Bed rest for at least 48 hours. I have a business to secure. Deegan rasped, his voice muffled by the mattress. Victor is securing it, Anna replied flatly, applying more pressure to his lower spine. As her hands brushed the junction where the scarring of his bullet wound began, she felt a massive spasm trigger in his legs. His dead limbs jerked violently against the sheets. It wasn't a small twitch. It was a severe, rigid extension that threw his hips off alignment. Deegan swore savagely, his hands gripping the headboard until his knuckles turned white. Breathe, Anna commanded, moving quickly. She grabbed his right leg, bending the knee forcefully toward his chest to break the clonus. The muscles fought her tight and unyielding. Your nervous system is in overdrive. The stress, the lack of sleep, the physical trauma, your body is panicking. Make it stop. He gritted out, a sheen of cold sweat breaking out across his back. I am, she promised. She held the stretch, throwing her own body weight against his thigh to keep it bent. Just focus on my voice. You're safe. The house is secure. Slowly, agonizingly, the rigid muscles in his leg began to melt. The spasm subsided, leaving his limbs heavy and motionless once again. Anna gently lowered his leg back to the mattress. She was breathing hard, a stray lock of hair sticking to her damp forehead. She walked back to the top of the bed and sat on the edge near his waist. Deegan turned his head to look at her. His slate-grey eyes were dilated with pain, stripped completely of the impenetrable armor he wore for the rest of the world. He was entirely helpless right now. He couldn't fight. He couldn't run. He couldn't even sit up without her assistance. In his world, vulnerability was a death sentence. Yet he looked at her with a raw, bleeding trust that terrified her more than the gunfire had. The bedroom doors opened. Victor stepped inside, pausing when he saw Anna sitting on the bed. His dark suit was immaculate again, but the dark circles under his eyes betrayed his exhaustion. Report, Deegan demanded, his voice tight. Volkov is dead, Victor said smoothly. Our team hit the meatpacking plant. They recovered Leo's sister. Volkov was waiting there with his inner circle. They didn't make it out. The Russian syndicate is fractured. It will take them 5 years to rebuild, assuming they don't slaughter each other for the throne first. Deegan rested his forehead back against his arms. And our casualties? 4 dead, 6 wounded. The rat was delivered to the docks, as ordered. Victor looked at Anna, then back to his boss. The city is yours again, Deegan. Total control. Good. Double the hazard pay for the men. Funerals paid in full. Now get out. Let me sleep. Victor nodded sharply. He turned to leave, but stopped with his hand on the brass doorknob. Miss Fisher. Anna looked up. You saved his life last night, Victor said. His voice lacked its usual cynical edge. It was solemn, absolute. The Corrado family does not forget a debt. Ever. He closed the door behind him. The heavy click echoed in the quiet room. Anna stared at the closed wood. A debt. She was exactly where she started. She had traded one obligation for another, only this time the currency wasn't money. It was blood. Deegan shifted on the bed, groaning softly as he rolled onto his side to face her. He reached out his heavy, bruised hand, wrapping loosely around her wrist. Go to sleep, Anna, he said softly. She looked down at him. The warlord was asleep. The man remained. She slipped off her shoes, laid down on the opposite side of the massive bed, and let the exhaustion finally drag her under. Friday arrived with the heavy, stifling quiet of a graveyard. The estate had returned to its normal rhythm, but the tension was gone, replaced by a sullen, hollow victory. Anna sat at the kitchen island staring at the manila envelope resting on the marble countertop. Victor had placed it there 10 minutes ago along with a cup of black coffee. "Tommy's markers," Victor had said, tapping the thick envelope. "Paid in full. Deegan signed off on them this morning. The loan shark considers the matter closed." Anna opened the flap. Inside were the original promissory notes stamped with a heavy red void. Beneath them was a cashier's check made out to her name. $50,000. Your contract was for 6 months. Victor had explained, watching her face carefully. "You fulfilled your practical value in 4 weeks. Consider the check a bonus for pulling him out of the line of fire. You are free to leave, Miss Fisher. A car is waiting to take you back to the city." She traced the raised lettering on the check. This was the goal. This was the finish line she had visualized every time she scrubbed her hands in the clinic bathroom, every time she endured Deegan's bitter insults, every time she stared at the high security walls. She was free. She stood up, leaving the check and the documents on the counter. She walked down the long, silent hallway toward the study. The heavy oak doors were open. Deegan was sitting behind his desk. He was back in his tailored charcoal trousers and a crisp black shirt. The only sign of his injuries was the slight, stiff hesitation in his right shoulder when he moved his hand to sign a document. He didn't look up when she stepped into the room. "The car is idling, Anna," Deegan said. His voice was perfectly flat. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. The emotional intimacy of the past 3 days had been boxed up, sealed and buried under a mountain of Mafia stoicism. "I saw the envelope," Anna said, crossing her arms over her chest. "Your brother is clear. He tries to borrow money from my people again, I'll cut his hands off. Tell him that." Deegan signed another page, his pen scratching loudly against the paper. "Take the money. Go back to your clinic. Forget this place exists." Anna walked slowly toward the desk. She stopped right in front of him, planting her hands on the polished mahogany surface. "Are you firing your physical therapist, or are you pushing away the woman who knows you can't lift your arms today without wincing?" Deegan finally stopped writing. He dropped the pen. He looked up at her, and the slate-grey eyes were brutal, hard, and entirely defensive. "I'm cutting dead weight," he said viciously. "You did your job. I paid you. The transaction is complete. You don't belong in this world, Anna. You saw what happens here. You saw me order a boy's death. You think you can live with that. You think you can sleep next to a butcher every night and not get blood on your own hands. I don't expect a fairy tale, Deegan. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a slaughterhouse." He gripped the wheels of his chair, pushing himself back from the desk with a violent shove. "Look at me. Look at this." He slammed his fist down onto his unfeeling thigh. "I am broken. I am a target. Every day is a war, just to stay upright. I will not have a civilian weakness lingering in my house for my enemies to use against me." Anna didn't flinch. She walked around the side of the desk. Deegan turned the chair to face her. His jaw locked, his eyes burning with a dark, furious pride. He was trying to scare her away. He was trying to hurt her before she could leave him. "You think I'm a weakness?" Anna asked, her voice dropping to a fierce, quiet intensity. "I pulled you out of a sniper's crosshairs. I broke your spasms when you were screaming into a pillow. I am the only person in this God-forsaken house who isn't afraid to tell you when you're acting like a fool." She stepped between his footplates. He tried to pull back, but she grabbed the armrests of his chair, locking him in place. She leaned down, her face inches from his. "You are a terrifying man, Deegan Corrado. You are ruthless, and you are cynical, and your life is a nightmare." She reached up, cupping his face. Her thumb brushed over the faded scar on his eyebrow. "But you are also the man who spared a traitor's sister. You are the man who fought a war from a wheelchair and won." Deegan's breathing hitched. The icy armor cracked, revealing the starving, desperate man beneath. His hands came up, gripping her hips with a bruising, possessive force. "If you stay," he whispered, his voice vibrating with a dark, heavy warning. "There is no going back. You don't get to leave when it gets too dark. You belong to me. To this." "I don't belong to anyone," Anna corrected smoothly, sliding her hands into his thick, dark hair. "I choose to be here, and I choose you. Broken legs, mafia wars and all." Deegan let out a shuddering breath. He pulled her down, burying his face in the crook of her neck. He held her with a desperate, crushing strength, anchoring himself to the one real thing in a world built on lies and violence. Anna wrapped her arms around his broad shoulders, holding him back just as fiercely. The house was quiet. The war was over. And as she stood there in the arms of the crippled king of the city, Anna knew the math of her life had permanently changed. She was no longer surviving. She was reigning. Did Anna just make the biggest mistake of her life, or did she finally find the one man who sees the world exactly as she does? Deegan's empire is built on violence, and his enemies are circling like vultures. But the real danger might just be behind closed doors. If you're hooked on Anna and Deegan's dark, twisted journey, don't leave me hanging. Hit that like button, share this video with your fellow romance addicts, and make sure you subscribe.